Some secrets are buried too deep. Some lies are covered for too long. Until everything shatters in a single moment. One wrong move. One fateful decision. And when the darkness comes, no one can escape it. The wind howled through the towering skyline of New York City, its icy breath rattling the glass windows of Kingston Tower, a fortress of power built from sweat, sacrifice, and ruthless ambition. But inside its penthouse suite, the air was thick with silence, not the kind that brought peace, but the kind that choked, the kind that came before a storm. Liam Kingston stood motionless at the floor-to-ceiling windows, his broad shoulders tense, his piercing gaze locked onto the city below. The whiskey in his hand remained untouched, its amber liquid swirling beneath the dim golden lights. But his mind? A battlefield. Tonight, New York pulsed with life, cars honking, sirens wailing, laughter spilling from rooftop bars. The world kept moving, but his world had stopped because she was gone. And for the first time in his life, Liam Kingston, the cold-hearted millionaire, the untouchable force in real estate, the man who controlled everything, felt utterly powerless. His jaw clenched, the muscle ticking in his cheek. His suit, custom-tailored, sharp, perfect, felt suffocating. He pulled at his tie, loosening it with a sharp jerk. No amount of money, no well-calculated move, no ruthless business tactic could fix this, because Elena Carter had walked out of his life, and she had taken something with her, something he never thought he had to give, his heart, the night it all began. 2 months earlier, he never would have believed this moment was possible. Back then, love had been nothing more than a word, a weakness he watched destroy men weaker than him. And women? They were a game, predictable, temporary, forgettable. But not Elena. She had been a fire in a world of cold calculations. He met her at the most extravagant event of the season, the Kingston Foundation Charity Gala, a night of flashing cameras, high-stakes deals, and whispered conversations among the city's most powerful elite. He had been standing at the center of it all, commanding the room with his presence, until his eyes landed on her. Elena Carter. She wasn't like the women who chased after him, the ones who draped themselves in diamonds and whispered empty promises in his ear. She didn't try to impress him. She didn't even acknowledge him. Instead, she stood on the far side of the ballroom, laughing. Genuine. Unaffected. Untouched by the wealth and power that had every other person in this room bowing at his feet. And that infuriated him. Liam Kingston was a man who dominated industries, who crushed his competitors with a single deal. Yet this woman didn't even spare him a glance. So he walked toward her, glass in hand, his signature smirk in place, ready to do what he did best: win. "You're the first woman in this room who hasn't tried to catch my attention." She looked up, her piercing blue eyes meeting his with an expression that sent a jolt straight through his chest, unimpressed. "I don't need your attention, Mr. Kingston." She sipped her champagne, her voice smooth as silk, her lips curling in amusement. "I actually prefer to avoid it." A challenge, one he never saw coming. And in that moment, the game changed. But now the game was over, because Elena Carter was gone, and she had left behind nothing but silence. His fists tightened at his sides. His heart pounded against his ribs, an unfamiliar ache settling deep in his chest. She couldn't have just walked away. Not after everything. Not after the fire, the war, the battle of wills that had ignited between them. Number something was wrong. The thought slithered into his mind like a shadow, curling around his gut like ice. And then, his phone rang. The sharp vibration cut through the suffocating silence. A number he didn't recognize. His pulse thundered as he reached for it, fingers tightening around the device. He hesitated for a fraction of a second. then answered, "Liam." The voice on the other end was soft, fragile, but it wasn't Elena. It was a voice he hadn't heard in years. "You don't know me, but I know Elena, and if you ever want to see her again, you'll listen carefully." The world stopped. The air in his lungs turned to ice, every fiber of his being locked into place. Because this wasn't a game anymore. This was war. And if someone had taken her, God have mercy on them, because Liam Kingston wouldn't. The wind howls through the steel giants of New York, whipping through the towering skyline like a ghost in the dark. Below, the city pulses, cars honking, sirens wailing, neon signs flickering against wet pavement. But inside Kingston Tower, on the topmost floor, the world is silent. Not the silence of peace, the silence of impending war. A crystal glass slips from Liam Kingston's fingers. It shatters against the marble floor, shards scattering like 1,000 broken promises. But Liam doesn't move. His grip tightens around the phone pressed to his ear, veins taut beneath the skin. His usually composed, razor-sharp gaze is locked forward, unblinking. The voice on the other end of the call is calm. Too calm. "You don't know me, but I know Elena, and if you ever want to see her again, you'll listen carefully." Something inside Liam fractures. The breath in his lungs turns to ice. His jaw clenches so tightly it feels like stone beneath his skin. He had seen this before. Hostile takeovers, threats, enemies clawing for a piece of what he owned. But this was different, because Elena Carter wasn't just an asset. She wasn't a contract he could renegotiate. She wasn't a problem he could eliminate with money. She was the only thing that had ever made him feel. And now she was gone. Liam exhales slowly, measured. The storm inside him is violent, a hurricane barely contained beneath the surface. Where is she? His voice is low, controlled, but deadly. Silence. Then, a chuckle. Software mocking. Cruel. "Oh, Mr. Kingston, I was hoping you'd ask something a little more original." Liam's free hand flexes at his side, fighting the urge to throw the entire desk across the room. He forces his voice to remain level. "If this is about money, no, Mr. Kingston. This isn't about money." The words drop like lead. A realization slams into him. Whoever this man was, he wasn't after wealth. And that meant something worse, because money could fix anything. But if this wasn't about money, then Elena's life wasn't a bargaining chip. It was a game. Liam's grip tightens around the phone. His muscles coil with barely restrained fury. "What do you want?" His words come out lethal. Another pause. Then the voice darkens. "Elena has something that belongs to me, and I want it back." Liam's breath slows. His mind shifts, calculating, searching. His entire existence had been built on knowing every angle before his opponent even played their hand. But right now, he was in the dark. "If you touch her, I don't need to hurt her. Yet." The casual indifference in the man's voice sends a sharp spike of rage through Liam's chest. Outside, lightning flashes across the sky, illuminating the city in a stark burst of white. The rain hammers harder against the glass walls of the penthouse, like the world itself can feel his fury. Liam's mind spirals through possibilities. Who the hell was this? Elena had never mentioned enemies, never hinted at anyone dangerous lurking in her past. But there were secrets. The way she hesitated when he asked about her past, the guarded way she looked at certain places, certain people. And now, those secrets had come for her. His voice drops, filled with venom. "You have 10 seconds to tell me what you want before I find you myself." The man on the other end laughs. Now, Liam. We both know you're too smart for ultimatums. You'll do what I say because you don't have a choice. And if you don't?" There's a slow inhale. Let's just say Elena's last words won't be your name. Liam doesn't blink. He doesn't breathe. The storm inside him snaps. The phone screen cracks beneath his grip. A single thought slams into his mind with brutal force. Whoever this man was, he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The call cuts off. The dead silence that follows is suffocating. For the first time in years, Liam isn't in control. And that is unacceptable. Rain slams against the windshield, heavy and relentless, as Liam Kingston's Aston Martin DB11 slices through the slick streets like a bullet. The city rushes past in a blur of neon and shadows. The streets are alive, horns blaring, headlights streaking through puddles, the occasional wail of a siren piercing the night. But inside the car, there is only silence. Not the kind that soothes, the kind that comes before destruction. Liam's grip on the steering wheel is tight, his knuckles white, his jaw clenched so hard it feels like stone beneath his skin. Elena is missing. A name, a location, a target. He needs them. Now, his phone buzzes. One glance at the screen. Ethan. He presses a button on the steering wheel, activating the car's Bluetooth. Talk. His voice is razor sharp, slicing through the thick air inside the car. I've got something. Ethan's voice is calm, controlled, but beneath it there's an edge. Liam's grip tightens. Where? I ran a trace on Elena's phone. Signal went dead about an hour ago near the docks, Pier 47. The docks. Dark, isolated. The kind of place where things disappear. Liam's pulse spikes, but his voice remains steady. Security footage? Already hacked into the traffic cameras. She left her apartment at 8:42 p.m., was followed by a black SUV. Plates are fake, no registry. They cut down a side street at 9:03. After that, nothing. Liam exhales slowly. A black SUV, untraceable, professional. This wasn't a random abduction. This was planned. His fingers drum once against the leather steering wheel. His mind sharpens like a blade, cutting through the haze of anger and fear. Who owns Pier 47? A pause. Then, officially, it's an abandoned shipping yard. Unofficially, it's been used for black market trades, off-the-books shipments, mostly small-time players. But recently, there's been chatter about a new player in town. Liam's jaw tightens. A name, Ethan. Ethan exhales. No confirmation yet, but there's been whispers about someone moving in on old turf. Some guy known as Santos. Low profile, but dangerous. Liam's eyes darken. He doesn't care who Santos is. He only cares about one thing. Meet me at the docks in 20. Liam. 20. Bring everything you've got. Liam ends the call before Ethan can argue. He presses the accelerator. The engine roars as the car surges forward, slicing through the rain. Lightning cracks in the distance, illuminating the skyline in a brief, blinding flash. And in that moment, Liam Kingston makes a promise. Whoever took Elena, they just signed their death warrant. The air is thick with salt and decay. The scent of oil and rust lingers, mixing with the distant stench of the Hudson River. Dim yellow floodlights flicker, barely illuminating the vast, empty shipping yard. Steel containers loom like silent tombs, stacked high, creating a labyrinth of shadows and rusted metal. A storm is rolling in. Thunder growls across the sky, lightning flickering like a warning. But Liam doesn't care. He steps out of the car, the rain cascading down his face, his expensive coat quickly drenched. He doesn't flinch. Ethan is already there, leaning against a blacked-out SUV dressed in all black. His expression is unreadable, but his eyes flicker with something dangerous. Tell me you brought the right equipment. Liam's voice is low, lethal. Ethan smirks, pops the trunk open. Inside, guns, tactical gear, everything they need. I don't show up unprepared. Liam doesn't hesitate. Reaches in, grabs a Glock, checks the magazine, fully loaded. His movements are precise, practiced. This isn't new to him. Ruthlessness is in his blood. Any movement inside? Liam asks, nodding toward the shipping containers. Ethan shakes his head. Too quiet. No guards outside, which means either it's empty or it's a trap. Liam smirks. Let's find out. He cocks the gun and walks straight into the lion's den. The docks stretched before them, a graveyard of rusted metal and forgotten shipments. The heavy rain pounded against steel containers, turning the pavement into a slick, reflective surface. A place where secrets are buried. Liam Kingston didn't hesitate. He moved forward, deliberate, calculated, dangerous. His leather-gloved hand gripped the gun firmly, finger resting near the trigger. Ethan walked a step behind him, scanning the shadows. Too quiet, Ethan murmured. Liam agreed. No guards, no movement, just the sound of rain hammering metal, which meant one of two things. Either Elena wasn't here, or they were expected. Liam's eyes flicked across the towering containers, searching for signs of life. A single floodlight flickered in the distance, casting long, menacing shadows across the yard. Then, a sound. A footstep. Both men stopped instantly, instincts honed over years of high-stakes deals and dangerous encounters. Ethan raised his gun. Liam didn't turn. He didn't flinch. "Show yourself," he ordered, his voice cold, sharp, lethal. Nothing. Then, a figure emerged from behind a steel container, stepping into the dim light. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black combat gear. A scar sliced down the side of his face, disappearing beneath the shadow of his jawline. He wasn't alone. 4 more men stepped out from behind containers, all armed. They were waiting for him. Liam's pulse remained steady. He wasn't afraid of a fight, but something in his gut told him this wasn't just about intimidation. The scarred man smirked, tilting his head. "Mr. Kingston?" he drawled, his voice thick with amusement. "I was starting to think you wouldn't come." Liam's grip on the gun tightened. "Where is she?" His tone was lethal, devoid of patience. The man exhaled dramatically. "Straight to business, huh?" He gestured around. "No small talk? No introductions?" Liam wasn't playing games. "I'll ask one more time. Where? Is she?" The scarred man chuckled, shaking his head. Then, without warning, a door creaked open, and Liam's entire body locked into place. Abandoned warehouse. Pier 47. Night. The first thing Elena Carter felt was cold. Her body ached, her wrists burned, raw from the tight ropes binding them behind her back. A metallic taste lingered in her mouth. Blood, maybe. Her head pounded. She tried to move, but her body protested. Every muscle screamed. Then she heard it. Voices. Men talking in hushed tones. Her heartbeat spiked. She forced herself to breathe, to focus. Slowly, her eyes adjusted to the dim, flickering lights overhead. A warehouse. Concrete floors, metal beams, the scent of damp air and gasoline. And then, a shadow loomed. A man stepped forward, his boots echoing against the cold ground. Tall, broad, a cruel smirk pulling at his lips. "Finally awake, princess?" His voice was thick with amusement. Elena didn't flinch. She forced herself to meet his gaze. "Where's Liam?" Her voice was hoarse but steady. The man's smirk widened. "Oh, he's coming." Something in the way he said it sent a chill through her spine. Because this wasn't just about her. This was about Liam. And the men holding her wanted him to come. The gunshot ripped through the air, cutting through the chaos like a blade. For a second, time froze. Elena's scream pierced the night, raw and terrified. Liam whirled, his pulse thundering, eyes locking onto the source of the shot. Then, pain. A sharp, burning sensation exploded through his left shoulder. He staggered back, his body reacting before his mind could register the damage. His breath hitched, a searing heat spreading through his muscles. Blood. Dark, thick, seeping through his tailored suit. But Liam Kingston didn't fall. Didn't even flinch. His grip tightened on his gun, his vision sharp despite the pain. The shooter stood 10 feet away, gun still raised. One of the remaining men, eyes wide with the realization that he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Liam didn't hesitate. He fired. One clean shot, straight between the man's eyes. The body dropped. Silence followed. Only the sound of rain hammering against steel, the distant groan of a shipping container shifting in the wind. Then, a gasp. Liam turned. Elena was on her knees, her hands still tied, her gaze locked on the blood spreading across his shoulder. Liam. Her voice shook, her face pale. He took a step toward her, then another, until he was standing right in front of her, his breath still ragged from the fight, but his eyes steady. "You're safe now," he said, his voice low, rough, but certain. She looked up at him, her blue eyes glistening with something unspoken. And then, she lunged forward, arms wrapping around his waist, her face buried in his chest. Liam stiffened, not because of the pain, but because this was the first time anyone had ever held him like this. Like he wasn't just a man made of power and control. Like he wasn't untouchable. Like he was human. He exhaled slowly, his good arm coming around her, his fingers resting lightly against her back. For the first time in his life, Liam Kingston wasn't the one in control. And for the first time, he didn't care. Hours later, the docks were swarmed with flashing red and blue lights. Ethan stood near one of the blacked-out SUVs, his phone pressed to his ear, his expression unreadable. Liam sat on the back of an ambulance, his injured arm wrapped in white bandages. But his focus remained solely on Elena. She was seated beside him, a thin blanket draped over her shoulders. Her wrists were raw, her lips still slightly swollen, but her eyes stronger than ever. The paramedics had tried to get her to rest, to check for a concussion, but Elena had refused. She wouldn't leave Liam's side. Liam felt it, the way she stole glances at him, the way her fingers twitched slightly, as if she wanted to reach for him but didn't know how. Finally, she broke the silence. "I thought I'd never see you again." Liam turned to her. For a moment he didn't speak, didn't know how, because something inside him had changed tonight, something he wasn't ready to face. But instead of running from it, he reached for her hand. His fingers brushed against hers, slow and deliberate. And Elena? She didn't pull away, because for the first time they both knew. This wasn't just survival. This was something more. Liam Kingston's penthouse. Night. The elevator doors slid open silently, revealing the sleek, dimly lit interior of Liam Kingston's penthouse. Elena hesitated. She had been in this place before, but never like this. Never as the woman he had almost lost. Never as the woman who had seen him bleed. The city skyline stretched out before them, shimmering through the glass walls like a sea of fallen stars. But Elena didn't care about the view. She cared about the man beside her. Liam walked in without a word. His movements were controlled, precise, but different. Something in him had shifted. His usually perfect posture was strained, his injured shoulder stiff beneath the bandages. But more than that, his walls, the ones he had built so high, had cracked. Elena stepped forward, hesitant, watching as he unbuttoned his suit jacket with his good hand, the fabric damp with blood and rain. She opened her mouth to speak, but he beat her to it. "You should sleep," he said, his voice lower than usual, rough from exhaustion. Elena studied him, the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers twitched like he was holding something back. "Liam, go." His voice was sharp this time, not out of anger, out of fear, not for himself, for her. Elena exhaled. She knew he was pushing her away, but she had already lost him once. She wasn't going to let it happen again. Slowly, she stepped forward. "I'm not leaving you like this." Liam stilled. His jaw tightened, his fingers curled into fists at his sides. And then, finally, he turned to her. "Elena, you don't understand." "Then help me understand." Her voice was gentle, but firm. He had saved her life tonight, but she wasn't going to let him drown alone. Liam exhaled sharply, his eyes darkening as he took a slow step toward her. "I could have lost you tonight." His voice was quieter now, rougher, more vulnerable than she had ever heard it. "And you think I don't know that?" she whispered, her gaze locked onto his. She took another step closer, so close she could see the storm in his eyes. "You think I didn't feel that same fear?" Liam's throat worked. For a moment, he didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there breathing her in, like he wasn't sure if she was real. And then he reached for her. His fingers brushed against her jaw, light as a whisper. Elena's breath caught, not because of the touch, but because for the first time, Liam Kingston wasn't in control. Not of himself, not of her, not of this. And for the first time, he didn't care. "I don't know how to do this." His voice was barely above a whisper. Elena looked up at him, her heartbeat thundering. "Then let's figure it out together." Liam exhaled, his forehead resting lightly against hers, their breaths mingling in the charged silence. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them had to. Because for the first time in his life, Liam Kingston wasn't running, and neither was she. New York City, unknown location. Night. A burnt-out warehouse stood at the edge of the city, abandoned, forgotten. But inside, someone was watching. The glow of a laptop screen flickered against the darkness, illuminating a single name on the screen. Liam Kingston. A soft chuckle echoed through the room. He has no idea what's coming. A figure leaned back in a leather chair, fingers tapping lazily against the table. On the screen, a live security feed, the penthouse. Liam, Elena, being watched. Let's see what happens when the king finally bleeds. And in the shadows, the hunt was far from over. The city lights cast long shadows across the penthouse, painting golden streaks over the sleek furniture. Liam sat in his leather chair, a glass of whiskey in his hand, but he didn't drink. He was watching her. Elena stood by the window, wrapped in one of his dress shirts, the fabric too big for her, sleeves rolled up as she hugged herself. She hadn't spoken much since they returned, since she had nearly been taken from him. "Talk to me." Liam's voice was low, controlled, but beneath it, there was something raw. Elena turned, her blue eyes searching his. "Who were they, Liam?" she asked. "Who would want to hurt you this badly?" Liam's jaw ticked. He had built an empire on power, control, and precision. He had enemies. But this wasn't about him. This was about her. And he needed to know why. Before he could answer, Ethan's voice crackled through the speaker on his desk. "Boss, we've got a problem." Liam froze. His gut told him this wasn't over. "What is it?" "There's been a breach in our security system. Someone tapped into the building's private cameras. And Liam, it's not just your penthouse. It's the whole damn building." A chill ran down Elena's spine. Liam didn't hesitate. He grabbed his gun. The surveillance room was in chaos. Screens flickered, distorted images appearing and disappearing. Lines of code streamed across the security feeds. Someone was in their system, and they weren't being subtle. Liam and Elena stepped in just as Ethan turned from the screens, his expression grim. "This isn't just hacking," Ethan muttered. "This is a message." Liam's eyes narrowed. One screen finally cleared, and what he saw made his blood run cold. A live feed of Elena. Not now, but from weeks ago. She was walking alone, down a street, unaware that someone was following her. A shadow. A figure in black. It wasn't just a kidnapping attempt. She had been watched for months. "Who the hell is doing this?" Liam demanded. Elena's breath hitched, and then the screen glitched again. A message appeared. "Did you really think I'd let you keep her, Liam?" Elena's body went rigid. "I know that voice," she whispered, her face draining of color. Liam turned to her sharply. "Who?" She swallowed, her lips trembling as she spoke the name she had spent years trying to forget. Santos. Safe house. Secret location. Night. The room was dimly lit, but it wasn't empty. Santos sat at the center, sipping a glass of wine. A man who had once been everything to Elena, and the man who now wanted her dead. Liam Kingston. He smirked, his deep voice dripping with amusement. "You took something from me. Now I take something from you." A shadow moved in the corner. One of Liam's own men. A traitor. Santos chuckled. "You trusted the wrong people, Kingston. That's your weakness. You think money buys loyalty." He leaned forward, eyes darkening. "But fear? Fear is what truly controls men." The traitor stepped forward, pressing a gun against Santos's temple. And then, he pulled the trigger. Santos's body slumped forward, his blood pooling beneath him. Liam stood behind him, gun still smoking, eyes void of mercy. "No, Santos." His voice was deadly quiet. "Your weakness was thinking I played fair." Elena's hair whipped in the wind, her breath heavy as she turned to Liam. "Are we safe now?" she whispered. Liam studied her, his dark eyes unreadable. Then he cupped her face gently, his touch so soft it almost broke her. "You will never have to run again." Tears welled in her eyes, and for the first time in years, she believed him. The jet's engines roared to life, and together, they disappeared into the night. Months later, a hidden estate, far from New York. Liam stood at the balcony, watching the sunset. His body relaxed in a way it had never been before. Behind him, Elena wrapped her arms around his waist, her head resting against his back. "You're really done with all of it?" she murmured. Liam turned to face her, and for the first time in his life, he smiled. "I already have everything I want." Elena smirked, rolling her eyes. "So the ruthless millionaire finally learned to be happy?" Liam tilted her chin up, his thumb brushing against her bottom lip. "No," he whispered, his voice deep and teasing. "I learned that happiness means nothing without you." And then he kissed her, slow, deep, and in that moment, Liam Kingston, the man who once believed love was a weakness, finally understood. Love wasn't his downfall. It was his greatest victory. Did that ending leave you breathless? Liam Kingston started as a man who controlled everything, except his heart. But in the end, he had to risk it all for the one woman who changed him forever. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Was this the perfect ending? Or would you have wanted a different twist? Did Liam deserve his redemption? Would you have trusted him or walked away? Don't let the story end here. If you love intense, dramatic, and powerful love stories, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the next one. because sometimes the most dangerous love is the one you never saw coming. Turn on notifications and get ready for the next roller coaster of emotions.